Hi everybody. So we're going to talk about a good and a bad of something that people consider good nowadays. So everybody knows that one of the bad things that has happened is the overutilization. We use too much petroleum products, crude oil, gasoline, all those things that pollute the world and cause excess carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, so forth as well too, and so forth, global warming. So cars, internal combustion engines, very inefficient overall. We know this. We also know that it used to be that most cars 20, 25 miles per gallon, so forth as well too. We have cars nowadays that still only get 10, 12 miles to the gallon. We also have cars nowadays that can get 45 miles to the gallon. New technologies have made gasoline engines more efficient, and that's really a good thing. Now, we're not going to really talk about gasoline anymore because we are, within the next 3 to 5 years, going to be at a tipping point where pretty much the gasoline engine using petroleum products is going to go out. That's a very, very good thing because it's going to create less problems overall. Hopefully over time, even the utilization of coal burning for electricity energy production will be decreased quite a bit. Very, very good things. We know they cause a lot of problems. Now, 100 years, or whatever it is that we have been doing this, been increasing the utilization of oil, has created humongous and robust economic growth. The next economic growth that occurs will be the transition from utilizing a non-renewable resource, or what we call a non-renewable resource. And the reason why we call it a non-renewable resource is to be able to get back to those same resources takes millions of years. What we have utilized over 100 years or so is take about another 100 million years to replace all of that. So it's really not as easily renewable. So we consider it a non-renewable resource. So what is the next thing is to look at resources that are recyclable, renewable resources. And truthfully, we say that because it's always abundant and we're looking at on the terms of millions of years. So what am I talking about? Well, the sun. It's going to burn, it's going to produce billions upon trillions of kilojoules worth of, terajoules worth of electricity for a very, very long time, probably longer than the human civilization will ever exist. It will continue to provide the earth with energy long after we're gone as well too. And I look at it from the perspective as every species on earth only lasts on average a certain length of time. Yes, we are one of the few species on earth that has been able to utilize resources very, very uniquely, have been able to get off of earth as well too. So, you look at interplanetary species or whatever it is that a possibility? It is, sort of. And I will make another YouTube video about those considerations or so at another later point in time. But once again, when we look at renewable resources, the sun, and the sun's ability to produce other forms of energy, wind energy, or the moon producing water energy, and also the earth itself producing geothermal energies. Those are all, in a sense, renewable because they exist and there's really nothing that's going to stop it within our species' lifetime. Not just our lifetime, but our species' lifetime. So those are what we consider renewables. At some point, will they end? Yes, but not fast enough where we won't be able to utilize it for our entire species lifetime. Let's just say we're lucky to live 1,000,000 years. Like I said, we've only lived about, what, 1,000 years, 2,000, 10,000 years, whatever you want to call it. Very, like, if you think about our lifetime as a species, where we were able to create worlds the way we do, it's less than a drop in a bucket of the Earth's lifetime, as well as the solar system's lifetime, as well as even the sun's lifetime. Not even a drop in the bucket. So we transition from gasoline, crude oil that has provided us with tons and tons of energy, and we are pretty much utilized a pretty significant portion of that. So the next step is to look at solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energies, all these other renewable sources. What does that mean? Is we are adjusting our production to be able to capture that energy. And this is the biggest problem that isn't a problem right now, because we're doing it in very, very small quantities. We're capturing solar energy in very, very minute amounts. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's both, actually. The good side of it is the fact that we're being able to utilize it to transition off of sources that are currently more damaging to the human species. So utilizing less crude oil, less gasoline, that's going to help the human species survive longer. It's going to create less problems. It's going to help maintain the global environment so that we can be sustained better. Let's talk about solar panels. They capture the sun's energy. And are they less efficient than gasoline? Technically, if you look at the ability to capture the sun's energy, actually, yes. On average nowadays, you can capture about 20-25% of the sun's energy that would occur in a particular area. But once again, we can continuously capture it without causing further damage once that solar panel is produced. Yes, there is a carbon footprint to every solar panel that's produced. The coolest part of it is for every solar panel that's produced, and we utilize that to produce the energy necessary to produce the next solar panel, the amount of carbon footprint for every subsequent solar panel will slowly diminish. If we would have the ability to continuously do this the way it should be done, within a couple of generations, every solar panel that's produced would have a negative carbon footprint. The reality of it is you're only looking at one system and not the entire system itself. Solar panels are produced with so many different resources: silicone, aluminum, other forms of plastics, copper, wiring, and all these other things. So let's look at the resource side of it first. Silicone's very simple. You can get it from sand. Just take a bunch of sand, melt it, purify the silicone, make a big humongous chunk of silicone and cut it into the small wafers, and you're good to go. That's how silicone is made, in a sense. That's how you make a chip. Some of the leftover silicone or so, you can actually use it to make solar panels and help to make cheaper or more expensive, more efficient, less efficient solar panels. And we have newer technologies with solar capture. So that's part of it. Copper, it has to be mined. So the mining system itself is very carbon intensive right now. They use big machines that run off of gasoline and other petroleum products or so, and these are big, humongous mining trucks and so forth that use quite a bit. So metals, whatever it is, aluminum, so forth, all these things are utilized. And then once again, you look at the plastics that are involved, or even the glass that's involved, the substrates that are involved. They each use their own set of carbon footprint. and they add to the carbon footprint of a single solar panel. The manufacturing company that produces the solar panel, well, there's human cost, the cost of running the facilities, energy systems, and water resources and so forth as well too. So there's a lot of resources that need to come together to produce the solar panel. So once again, if things work out the way it exactly should, maybe for every 2 solar panels, you sell one, maybe you put one on the roof or so to help improve the energy utilization of the environment. And maybe at some point, that solar panel that you sold off, that company that sells off that extra solar panel, maybe they can give one to these mining or these other systems that help to get the resources. And then once again, the distribution of it means it has to be transported as well too. So companies are producing battery powered electric cars or so that use less combustion, so forth, to do the distribution side of it. Distribution companies, and even when it comes to boats that have to float across the world or so to transport products, diesel, natural gas, crude oil, they're still being utilized. There's a whole lot of the world that still is really, really difficult to transition from non-renewable resources to renewable resources right now. They're getting more efficient, but they're still utilizing crude oil and other forms of carbon dioxide, carbon emitting products or so for transportation itself. So once we get to the point where all these systems are capable of utilizing or transitioning to renewable resources, solar energy, wind energy, so forth, is it available all the time the way we want it to? No. The sun goes up and down. Wind gets fast, gets slow, tides change. So you don't always have a consistent form of renewable energy at any particular time. So when you do have it available and you have an abundance, the idea is to be able to store the abundance so you can use it whenever those resources are not abundant enough to support whatever system you want. A city at night versus during the day. Well, let's look at your typical city. Let's just say you want to run it on solar power. Well, during the day, if you have plenty of sunshine and you have enough solar panels, yeah, you can run the entire city during the day. But come 5 o'clock in the evening, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, when the amount of sunlight starts changing, you won't have enough to run your city at night. Or let's look at cloudy days for 2 or 3 days. You can't run a city if you don't have enough sunshine. Well, what can you say? They put more solar panels to offset the days that you get less solar energy. But still, once again, for the 10 hours at night or so, when there is not enough electricity, what do? So the idea is to be able to store the excess. It's come the wonderful storage systems that we have nowadays, everything from batteries to using thermal energy storage systems, kinetic energy systems. So let's talk about the kinetic energy systems. One of the things that we do for kinetic energy is hydropower, using the energy of water to produce electricity. And they have pump systems or so that, hey, during the day, you have an excess amount of energy from the sun. So what does it do? They utilize it to pump water up a hill and store it on top of the hill. So whenever you need energy when there's not enough solar power, you open up the floodgates or so, it turns the hydroelectric turbines or so and produces energy. It's a smart idea, but once again, it requires a lot of resources to do that. Let's use that as an example. When it's really hot, well, water evaporates. So the bigger your storage tank is, the more water evaporation is going to occur. Now we're talking about 10, 20,000, even 100,000 gallons. We're talking about millions of cubic meters worth of water to produce enough energy for a city. So the feasibility of it during, in the desert. No, that's not really feasible to utilize that type of system. They do have produced other kinetic energy systems, say moving concrete cinders from a point that's really high to a point that's really low, and using the kinetic energy that way, and using the excess electricity that's produced to move those back up. Is that good? Yes. It takes time to produce all those systems or so, and it takes a lot of resources as well too. Do we have, outside of those kinetic energy systems, other kinetic energy systems? Of course, we don't need it. We're not going to go through all of them, but once again, you can do your research. You're an intelligent person, I'm assuming, that's watching this, smart enough to turn on YouTube or whatever it is. Well, I just tell people, stop putting your head down and watching Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is, and do something more useful, like learn something. So let's talk about the other form of energy storage. There's the flow batteries, or the well, let's talk about the the molten salt system. So we use the energy of the sun to produce a lot of heat, and that melts a salt, and it's stored as pretty much liquid heat, so hot that it takes a solid and melts it and turns into a liquid. That's why we call it molten salt. And you store the heat until you need it. And similarly, kind of like the heat from coal, now you have a heat system that doesn't produce any carbon dioxide, any carbon emissions, and you can use the same amount of heat to generate steam, then turn a turbine to produce electricity. Same principles. Big, humongous systems. But once again, they're feasible and they occur. And you see them all the time. Well, not all the time, but they're available. It just takes a lot of time to build one of these systems appropriately. And you have to have an area that has enough space to do all of this, close to a city and so forth as well too. But it's doable. Flow batteries utilize chemical reactions or so to once again cause the flow of one form of substrate to the other to produce electricity, similar to how a regular battery works. Batteries are batteries. So let's talk about the one problem that we have that nobody talks about. Let's talk about the renewable batteries that are prominent today. Lithium-ion batteries, nickel metal batteries, so forth. These batteries that use an electrolyte gel, and how we're looking at it for the short term and the long term side of things. So the next revolution that's going to occur is the process of using batteries for the electric grid instead of peaker plants. Peaker plants are small electricity plants that utilize coal or whatever it is, natural gas, something that is able to initiate itself very, very quickly, but to produce electricity whenever the normal amount of electricity gets a little bit higher. So these activators, so when the system recognizes, hey, we need to turn on a peaker plant, and once again, they're quick, but they produce a lot of carbon emissions. So what do? Instead? You put a big-ass battery in it instead of the peaker plant, so that whenever that occurs, the batteries can provide that extra juice, that extra electricity. So that's great. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, now that we're wanting to go ahead and get rid of all these cars that use gasoline and transition them to electric vehicles instead. So all of the electric vehicles, they're going to utilize batteries, and that way they will have less systems inside of them that require maintenance. So the maintenance of the electric batteries is better. And the only thing is, the batteries itself needs to be recharged every now and then, and some basic maintenance occurs to make sure the car works the way it's supposed to. Tire changes, lubrication or so, maybe on some of the axles or whatever it is. And once again, over time or so, batteries are batteries. They degrade over time, so you have to replace the batteries every now and then. We're getting to the point where batteries won't be replaced as much, which is a very, very good thing. Electric systems, people are putting batteries in their homes, putting solar panels on the roof, which will decrease the stress and the constraints of an entire electric or grid system, which is a good thing. Now, over the course of the next 3 generations, what do you expect to see is that as economy of scales occur, batteries are going to get cheaper and cheaper to produce. Solar panels are going to get, in a sense, solar panels are fairly inexpensive nowadays. They are going to get more efficient as well too, which is going to be a good thing. So how do you produce all of the batteries necessary to transition 100 million cars to an electric system that is capable of averaging about 150 to 200 miles per car? People see this as, wow, why is it such a low number overall? And the truth is, when you look at the most expensive cars, those are the ones that will get more than 240 miles per charge. Hold on. Let's look at the sheer numbers behind the average battery system in a car nowadays. Can you charge a battery to 100%? Absolutely you can. But the more you do it, the more likely the quality of your battery, the efficiency of your battery, the longevity of your battery will decrease over time. If a lithium battery, which is the one that is mainly being used in almost all cars, electric vehicles nowadays, gets less than 20%, it will degrade the battery as well too. So your range or so is roughly from about 25, so you can drain it all the way down to about 25%, and you can go as high as about 90-95%. So 30% of the battery you can't use. So it might say 500 miles on the rating. But do they account for the fact that you really don't want to use the last 20-25% of your battery, and you don't want to charge it all the way above 90%? No, they don't. So they look at the total range of it. And they kind of pray that, hey, if you don't use your air conditioner or you don't use some of the extra systems, then your mileage will be improved or so to get those numbers or closer to those numbers. The reality of it is, if it's a 300 mile, a car that's capable of going 300 miles, you really only have a range of about 200 to 230 miles, maybe 240 miles. You have to give yourself the extra 60 miles so your battery doesn't degrade over time. Batteries are getting better and more efficient, so at some point we will be able to go down to 15%, maybe 20% consistently, and be able to charge above 95% consistently without destroying the battery. The reality is, for the next about 6 to 8 years, that's not going to happen anytime soon. One of the things is solid-state lithium batteries. That's going to be one of the kickers. Solid-state batteries is going to be one of the kickers where you can charge and discharge and not have to worry about those circumstances as much. But over time, once again, like anything else, it degrades over time. Hopefully, solid-state batteries are a lot longer than what we currently have right now, which is a liquid electrolyte in the batteries in cars, which there are safety concerns as well too, but they're getting more safe, a lot safer, whatever you want to call it. Sorry for the bad grammar. So let's talk about how do we upscale all of this. To upscale all of it, terawatts worth of batteries, worth of lithium. So lithium mining, resource mining or so for these carbon, lithium, nickel, manganese, all these things have to be upscaled quite a bit. So we stopped utilizing crude oil, petroleum, and now we're going to continuously mine all of the lithium instead, or all of the nickel and all of the copper, because once again, electric engines require a lot of copper to produce rotation. Very, very good torque. So the more copper, the better the magnetism, the more torque you'll have, the more power you have, the more efficient your electric motors can be. Batteries require quite lithium, nickel, so forth as well too. So we have to increase all this mining. So instead of drilling for oil, we're going to have to mine for all of this, and we're going to have to find all of this lithium as well too. So we're going to, instead of depleting the world of petroleum, now we got to deplete the world of lithium, of nickel, of copper, and use it even more extensively. And a terawatt is a joke when it comes to the energy needs of the world. In the next 20, 30 years, as economies grow because we have more energy abundance, and this is a given, the more energy you have to do something, the more power you have to do something, the more your economy grows, the more robust your world is, the better your technologies is, and so forth. So as we do this, so we stop depleting the world of petroleum, which it doesn't have anymore. It'll take 100 million years for that to come back. And now we're going to start depleting lithium and copper and all from the crust, the earth itself. It doesn't seem like a big effect right now, but once again, we're doing the same thing as 100 years ago that we started doing with petroleum without thinking about the consequences of it. And 100 years later, this generation, these last few generations, had to figure out the consequence of it. Well, what is the consequence 100 years from now, 50 years from now? Well, anyone who's watching this, do you really care? Probably not, because you'll be dead before the consequences of mining all this lithium, mining all this copper, mining all this nickel will affect the earth, which we have no clue. Has any major studies occurred from the way we're going to transition lithium and all this stuff? Do we even have a good recycling program for copper, for nickel, for lithium, for batteries in general? Actually, we don't. Everyone's trying, but once again, it takes so much energy. And truthfully, anything is recyclable if you have enough energy to do it. Think of the plastics in this world. Why do we not recycle it? Because the amount of energy needed to make plastic, not a whole lot. The energy to recycle plastic, orders of magnitude, so it's not worth it. We just don't have enough energy. We don't have enough power to be able to recycle plastics. Will this solve the problem? Switching over to renewable systems solve that problem of recycling plastic? Not yet. Maybe 100 years from now, we will have enough, maybe 50 years from now, 40 years from now, I don't know when, but when we manufacture enough ability to capture renewable resources to overtake the need of all these other non-renewable resources to produce power. Is that a possibility? Absolutely. But we have not considered the consequences of lithium utilization for human survival and what it's going to do to the world here within the next 7 to 8, maybe 10 generations from now. Do we care? Pretty much no one cares about it right now because no one has the slightest clue. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I look at it this way, is if history has repeated itself over and over and over again, and it says, hey, utilizing any one particular resource without balancing the use of other resources appropriately, has it caused a problem? Absolutely. Mining for oil, the best example in the world because it caused all these problems, and we know we're going to run out of it. Lithium, is it abundant? For now it is. But once again, 100 years ago, the mindset, the mentality is petroleum was very abundant because we found all these reserves. We didn't think that, hey, 100 cars was going to cause a problem to all of the oil in the world. But we went from 100 cars to 100 million cars. That's a different story now. Well, when we go from 100,000 electric cars to 100 million electric cars, will the carbon footprint of these cars go down quite a bit? Absolutely. But we got to stop talking about the carbon footprint. Now we got to start talking about the lithium footprint, or the nickel footprint, or the copper footprint, or the aluminum footprint, or the metal footprint. Whatever it is that all these new cars, what about all these old cars, 100 million internal combustion engine cars, cars that utilize gasoline, are going to be taken out of commission. What about the recycling for them, which we still don't even have a good recycling system for cars? If we did, then we would not have to mine for more metal. We would just be able to take the metal from the old cars and utilize it in our new cars and recycle them. But we don't. Not enough anyways. Similar to plastic is, we only recycle about 5 to 10% and reuse 5 to 10% of the plastics in the world. And that's it. The rest of it is somebody else's problem. And that's the mentality around the world is, hey, out of sight, out of mind. Well, the lithium thing is the same thing. The copper, nickel, manganese, whatever it is. It's the same thing as we don't think about it because it hasn't caused a problem yet. So what are the consequences to generations from now? We don't know. That's something to think about, because if we don't think about it appropriately, we're going to cause more problems. Would it be nice to be able to have a recycling system so we don't have to mine any more lithium, so we don't have to mine any more copper and so forth? Yeah, but nobody's going to take the Statue of Liberty and turn it into electric vehicles or electric motors. That doesn't work that way. That's not how society works. What we need to do instead is to figure out how to recycle copper that is already existent in items that are not important to us anymore. Other electronic devices, older cars, older alternators, whatever it is, that have all this available abundant copper that doesn't get recycled, that gets thrown into the dumpsters, and we don't utilize them anymore. Every electric motor nowadays has some form of copper in it, even the smallest ones. If we could recycle all of it, would we need to mine for more copper? Yes, we would, but not as much. It's just inefficient, and we don't have enough power, enough electricity, enough energy to recycle all of these things efficiently, or not even efficiently, just not enough to make it worthwhile, so we don't. That is the biggest conundrum that we have nowadays with all these lithium-ion batteries. It's not how much lithium is used, but how much resource. And in the long run is, if we don't appropriately recycle this, or we don't appropriately return these things back to where they really belong, what imbalances on Earth, in this world, does it cause? The truth is, we don't know yet. Thank you.